part of this thought that I want to share is actually the whole idea of stopping and celebrating, or stopping and remembering, why we do it, what we do. And I've got a verse to read to you guys this afternoon. It's a few verses. It's a bit more than I would normally share with you. It's Joshua chapter 4, verse 1-4, and verses 19-24. Joshua 4, 1-4. So this is as the people, as the nation of Israel is crossing the Jordan River to enter into the promised land. And this is when, this is the recounting of their crossing and then what they did after that. And so Joshua chapter 4, verse 1-4, it says, when all the people had crossed the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, now choose 12 men, one from each tribe, and tell them, take 12 stones from the very place where the priests are standing in the middle of the Jordan, carry them out and pile them up at the place where you will camp tonight. So Joshua called together all the 12 men that he'd chosen, one from each of the tribes of Israel, and he told them, go into the middle of the Jordan in front of the ark of the Lord your God. Each of you must pick up one stone and carry it on your shoulder. So that's important to remember. Each of you pick up one stone and pick it up, carry it on your shoulder, 12 stones in all, one for each of the tribes of Israel. And then it goes on to verse 19 to say, the people crossed the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month. Then they camped at Gilgal, just east of Jericho. It was there at Gilgal that Joshua piled up the stones taken from the Jordan River. And the Gilgal means, wait for this, circle of stones. Wow. Then Joshua said to the Israelites, in the future, your children will ask, what do these stones mean? Then you can tell them, this is where the Israelites crossed the Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the river right before your eyes, and he kept it dry until you were all across, just as he did at the Red Sea when he dried it up until we'd all crossed over. He did this so all the nations of the earth might know that the Lord's hand is powerful, and you might fear the Lord your God forever. And so these stones are kind of like the memorial of the win. The stones themselves aren't the win. It's not about the stones, obviously. No one's really excited that there's 12 stones in a circle. That's not what we're getting excited about. But so the stones aren't the win. The crossing of the Jordan, the miraculous crossing of an impassable river is the win. But the stones, they point to the win, don't they? The stones are the memorial of the win. They point to the stuff that the Israelites wanted to remember. They point to what the Israelites, what Joshua wanted the Israelites to remember, what God wanted the Israelites to remember. They point to what God and Joshua wanted the people to value about their past and to value about who they are. And so there's things about those stones that point to the kind of people that God was wanting these guys to know that they were, a people that were cared for by God, and they had a certain kind of people or a certain kind of nation. And just like all other nations, these kind of memorials, they all are representative of the culture. I watched a movie recently where it was an Australian movie, and it was filmed in the Kimberley, and there was a massive big gorge, and they had this little raft down the gorge, and there was all these Aboriginal paintings on the inside of the gorge. And it's a similar story, right? It's like the culture. This is what we're pointing to. This is who we are, and this is what we value. This is important to us. And so the stones are pointing to the culture of the people and the culture of the identity, the values. And this is who we are. It's the kind of people we want to be. And so the thought I wanted to bring to us this afternoon was that we as Beyond Church, there are certain stones that we are to carry. There are certain stones that we are to build with, and there are certain stones that we want to point people to. And it's the stones of our culture. And I wanted to take some thoughts from this verse because I think it's really interesting that this verse really talks specifically about the whole assemblage of these stones, right? So the leaders, firstly, they had to carry the stones. And like Beyond Church, we have to carry the culture. And so this is my question. What are you carrying today? What's the culture that you're carrying on your shoulders? Or what's the culture that you're carrying in your heart? Hopefully you're not carrying a chip on your shoulder. Hopefully you're carrying the culture of Beyond Church on your shoulder, because that'd be a bad start. Are you carrying, in your heart? Is it full of love? Is it full of inspiration? Are you having fun? Are you carrying excellence? Are you carrying that in your heart as part of the Beyond Church culture? Because as leaders, we carry the culture, don't we? We carry it. It's with us. We carry it into any room that we're going to enter. And if the room's not full of life, if the room's not full of love or inspiration or fun or excellence, that doesn't change unless we change it, because we bring the culture. We are the leaders, and we can't change it unless we're carrying it. And guess what? We can't carry it unless we picked it up. Like Joshua tells his leaders, he says, guys, let's pick up the stones. Let's pick up what we value. Let's pick up the culture. So we have, and how do we do that? So how do we pick up the culture? Well, this is my thought about that. I think that we have to position ourselves to pick it up. We've got to be where the culture is. And I wonder how we do that. I wonder how we continue to remind ourselves of the culture that we're supposed to carry. The way I do this is that as you know, and some of you have been to another church in Brisbane, Life Church, where we kind of got the whole idea of how important culture was for a church and an organisation. And so because I know they've got a really strong culture, the way that I position myself to pick up that culture is to be in a weekly location leaders call, much like, you guys are in this call right now, and we have a location leaders meeting once a week. It's positioning ourselves to be able to pick up the culture, the culture of heaven that God wants us to carry with us. And so I'm doing that. I'm in that meeting, and I'm going to places where there are people that are further ahead than me. I'm asking questions of leaders that have done more than I've done. We're trying to make sure that we're in a world that's bigger than our world. And I listen to what they're saying and listen to their suggestions, even do the things that they suggest. And the other thing that I do, I think we all should be doing all the time, is we should be listening and observing the language that people use, because language carries culture. And so what people say actually reveals a lot about their heart. And so if you want to pick up culture, we really need to have an ear to hear it. And so my question is, how will you pick up the life culture of Beyond Church, the culture you're called to carry today? Well, you're already doing it. You're in this call right now, so that's a big gold star. You didn't have to be here. Well, some of you probably did have to be here, but others might not have had to be here. So you're here. That's a great first step. The second thing you can do is to keep your heart soft toward leadership and ask lots of questions. That's another thing that I've found that it's been really helpful for me, is making sure that I'm the kind of person that asks lots of questions. I'm not really here to give necessarily lots of answers. And also, finally, and probably most importantly, how you pick up culture is actually by applying some of the principles that you're learning. And one of the things I've noticed in recent weeks is that Andrew has done this really, really well. He was called me a few weeks back about a few pastoral issues and had some questions about how to deal with, a certain situation. It wasn't major, but it was a bit tricky, and just some different kind of cultural differences between this person and, what we believe as a church. And, we talked through that. And we've done that a few times about a few different things where he just said, oh, how would you do this? How would you do that? And then Andrew had probably one of his most significant pastoral conversations that he's ever had to have, like in the last week. And when I called him, or he called me to see how things were going, he told me what he said to this person. And I'm like, that is brilliant. Like, that is something that I wouldn't have thought to have said in that conversation, but that's probably one of the most culturally on point things you could have said to build the person, to keep us as a church have integrity in who we are and what we're doing, but still lead well. Like, I just thought, wow, that was so good. And I think it's because, Andrew, and like we all should be doing, we're quite happy to hear input into our own life. We're happy to ask lots of questions, and then we're going to apply it. And I think that's what it's like to pick up the stones, to pick up the culture, is to do those things. So be where the culture is, allow it to affect you. And then this week, how can you find yourself in the position you need to be in to be filling your life with the kingdom culture that's going to move you forward and what you're leading forward. So carry the culture by picking up the stones. Secondly, the leaders, they built with those stones. They built with them. They created this memorial. They built this, I don't know, I'm guessing it's a circle because it's called Circle of Stones. I always imagined in my head it was like a pile of stones, but I think it might have been a circle. Maybe, I'm not sure, but maybe someone who knows more about history could tell me that. But we have to build the culture, and building culture is taking the culture that we carry and making it function as something that's measurable and something that's a reality. So it's taking the things that we know and making them function, making them work, right? So how do we build the life culture beyond church? Well, one of the things that I've seen, and actually I'm going to share another story that really illustrates this so well, and it's already been shared in one of our good reports this afternoon. Excellence is a cultural conviction of beyond church. Love, inspiration, fun, excellence. Excellence is a cultural conviction for us. So how does that become a measurable reality? Well, I've seen that happen this week where we as a church are re-entering the room, and we wanted to make sure the room was as excellent as it could be. And for us, excellence is doing the best with what we've got. It's not necessarily perfection. And so Rachel and I had a fairly heavy week last week leading into re-entry because of a whole lot of other stuff. We had a quarterly board meeting, a quarterly regional leaders meeting, among a few other key things that were happening in that week. So we said to the team, guys, you're going to have to actually carry a fair bit this week. We're coming back to the room. We want the room to be excellent. And so Natalie is charged with our facility management. So she didn't say much in the meeting, but I could just sort of see just the weight just sort of falling on her shoulders. And Kate as well. And so, you know, we walked into the room on Sunday morning, and some stuff that's just been an absolute mess for months was, you know, completely fixed. Things that most people probably wouldn't even notice or might not necessarily care about. But it's just that level of excellence that says that we actually want to do the very best we can with what we've got. And I think Natalie did that so well with repairing some walls and getting some painting done. I know Kate helped with some painting as well. But in addition to that, what was actually amazing about that was it wasn't just that she went and did the work that needed to be done, but she empowered others to do the work that needed to be done. Sure, she did some of it herself, but it's all about building teams because, you know, as you know, we don't build teams so we can run events and do jobs and run services. We run services and hold events and get things done because we want to build teams, because building teams raises leaders and building teams build people. So it's not actually about us painting things because that's actually not at all going to build your life. But what is going to build your life is empowering someone else to do something that God's put on their life. They're going to grow, they're going to rise in their leadership, and so are you as you begin to stretch and ask people to step into their God destiny. So I just think that Natalie really personified that this week, where she built the culture. So she knew it up here, but then she's like, okay, well, we need to get this done. We need to do it well. So we're going to do this, this, and this. But then we're actually going to empower other people to support us in that and invite people into a new team context. And I just thought that, this week she did an excellent job at that. So that's my question to you guys. Who could you invite into your world this week to help build kingdom culture with you? Because that's what it's all about. We're not doing services, doing events and getting things done for the sake of it. It's all about building teams, because building teams builds people and raises leaders, and that's what we're all about. So we pick up the stones, we build with the stones, and finally the leaders, they pointed to the stones. And we as leaders need to point to who we are, the values of Beyond Church, the culture of Beyond Church. We have to call people to the culture. So this is where we as leaders, it can get a little bit tricky here, because pointing people to the culture, if it's been, the Israelites at the time, within like that first generation who crossed the Jordan River, I mean, it would have been so easy just to go, hey guys, look, remember what God did, remember who we are, where we come from. And everyone's like, yeah, of course, my brother Steve, he was one of the guys that carried the ark. And then, oh yeah, Uncle Dave, he was the first one to go across after the ark. Oh yeah, Auntie Miriam, yeah, she was down the back there, she was with the tambourine singing and all that. So, that's right. So it's easy to remember. It's easy to point to the who we are, because it's very close to the event. But as time goes on, and as things change and, new habits start to develop, sometimes we can have what's called culture drift, and we just start to slip out of, and start to forget who you are and what you've been called to do. And so as leaders, it's incumbent upon us to point people to the culture. And that's what Joshua was doing when he's getting the leaders to build the culture, to build the stones. Remember the stones. So this is where us as leaders, where we challenge things that are countercultural, that aren't who we are, and we celebrate things that are cultural victories, things that reflect and represent the culture really well. And so one thing that we can do to help that is understand that people will repeat what's rewarded. And so if we can be always rewarding what is representative of culture, we're going to see that repeated. And that's why we have good reports. It's one of the reasons, because if we hear a good report about the conviction of, bringing love, or the cultural conviction of inspiration, or, how we all had fun together, and we point to it very clearly, that reminds us all, oh, that's who we are, and that's how we do things around here. We make sure that it's excellent. We make sure that we have fun when we do it. We make sure that it's bringing inspiration, and that it's preferring other people, that it's loving. So it's important to reward and have good reports about the good things that are happening. And it's important to be celebrating that, because we want others to carry it. We want others to build with it. It's not just about us. And we want to point to the cultural conviction that that behavior is reflecting, right? Because at the end of the day, we don't want people to simply follow instructions. This is actually really important, that we don't just want people to do things because they're told to do them. That's really not, I'm not interested in that at all, that people just become, robots and just become drones and they just do what they're told. I can't, because then you've always got to be telling people what to do. So unless you've told someone to do something, it won't get done. So there's a lot of stuff that happened, over the weekend, like even when in the auditorium, one of the ceiling tiles had fallen down. In the pre-service meeting, I'm thinking, oh, we need to fix that ceiling tile. It's such a shame. We've got everything else lovely and tidy. We even fixed that wall and painted that, and then the ceiling tile's fallen down. So I'll go and get that ladder and come back and fix that later. Or I could ask someone to do it, right? I could just get someone to fix it. So I came back into the auditorium and someone else was doing it without even being asked. And that's because someone's acting not just being told what to do. They're not just responding to a request. They're not just simply following an instruction. They're actually moved by a conviction. There's an internal motivation, a conviction in them that the culture of Beyond Church is excellence. And if that can be fixed this morning, we'll fix it, because that's who we are. And so that's why we point to those kinds of things. And that's why, when our team turns up on time, we don't say, thanks for being on time. Because to be honest, I don't really care if people are on time. What I care about is that we're preferring other people over ourselves, that we're honouring the team. And so when someone turns up on time, it's like, oh, thanks so much for honouring everybody in the room today. Thanks so much for preferring everyone else today. Like, being on time just points to a cultural conviction of preferring others over ourselves. It's the same thing when we've got a full roster of team. We don't just say, oh, thanks for being on team. It's great to have everyone here. We say, thanks for saying yes to God's call on your life, because that's what people are doing. They're actually stepping into their God destiny. They're not just turning up to be on a team. That's not really what it's all about. It's about them growing as leaders, growing together, being discipled, stepping into God's destiny for them. So that's conviction. It's not just about ticking a box and doing a job. So question, finally, who could you celebrate this week as we point to the stones? Who could we point to as being, a real outliving that cultural conviction of whatever it might be that you find being outlived this week? So I'm sure there's plenty of people you could do that. So that's it, except for this last little final one. This is a bonus. It's number 3.1. It's about the cornerstone, right? I've just jumped out of the Old Testament. Well, I haven't really. I'm kind of going back in there because this is from Psalm chapter 118, verse 22. It's talking about Jesus, a prophetic word about the coming Saviour. The Bible says that he's the stone that the builders rejected. He's become the cornerstone. And one thing about living a kingdom culture life is that if it's a life that's lived like Jesus, then if Jesus is the cornerstone of your life, then you may have to be prepared to experience some rejection, just as Jesus experienced. And rejection really actually is a privilege. And it's okay for us to not necessarily be the same as everybody else, because we are a countercultural people. The people of Israel, they were a called out people. They were a set apart people. They were a unique people, God's own people. And that's you and that's me. And so there are some things that we do, and there are some cultural convictions we have that not everybody has. And so if you are looking for a comfortable life as a leader in the kingdom, it's not going to happen. That's just not what you sign up for when you say yes to step into God's call on your life. There's a lot of other great things you're going to get, but comfort is not one of them, because you'll always be slightly out of step with the culture of the world around you. And we've got to be okay with that. We've got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I want to finish with this story, and I'll celebrate my mum for this one. And she shared it at our leaders thing on Saturday, but she'd been ringing someone on her call list. She's a virtual life group leader for like 2 years. And and they were just not responding to her calls or her text messages. And sometimes you kind of think to yourself, well, am I just harassing somebody? And the culture of this world is, yeah, that's harassing someone. Why do you keep ringing them and keep messaging them every month? Like, what's that about? Maybe we should just not worry about that anymore. Maybe we should just, divert that, time into something else that may be getting more of an immediate return or, immediate feedback. It doesn't seem to be really generating what I expected to. And the thing that is really cool about that is that the simple consistency of that is countercultural. And it's happened with other people too. This is one example. I mean, there's many of us that have been calling and messaging people for many, weeks, months, and even years. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we had people in church yesterday that haven't been, in church, not just for the last 4 months, but for the last 6 to 9 months. And they came back. Some people had been in church yesterday who haven't been to church for years and years. One guy has been to this church once, like probably 10 years ago, and he was here on Sunday. So it's countercultural to be continually pursuing and reaching out to people who seem like they just are sort of standoffish. But, Mum's story is that she called this person, texted this person for a couple of years. And then finally this person responded and said, look, I'm going to be there on Sunday and, my kid wants to come to youth. So guess what? The person wasn't here on Sunday. And I just think that's fantastic, because what that points to is the fact that, hey, we're going to continue to reach out to that person. And culturally, in that you might think, oh, well, they said they were going to come and they weren't going to be here. I've been calling them for 2 years and messaging them. That's it. That's the final straw. I'm never going to call them or message them ever again. But the culture of the kingdom says that nobody slips through the cracks. Nobody slips. Until that person tells us to go away, we will not stop pursuing them. And that's what Jesus has done for you. Until you say to Jesus, go away, he is going to pursue you and pursue you and pursue you until you are with him again. So that's the culture of Beyond Church. I think it's very much like the culture of the kingdom of heaven. And so let's remember it. Let's remember the wins, remember the great stuff that God's done in and through our lives at Beyond Church. And let's carry the culture. Let's build the culture together, and let's point everyone to the culture. And also let's be okay with being uncomfortable, because we do live a countercultural life in this world. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
We can